I'm Steve Wilkerson. I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, companies like Uber and Lyft, who use internet applications to identify, pick up, and transport individuals from one part of a city to another or one location to another, usually in competition with taxi cab companies, have come under a lot of scrutiny nationally and in Florida from both local and state governments who are considering both regulating them, mainly regulating them, or also possibly taxing them. What's up? It's a big subject coming up for the 2016 session.
It's a big subject in a lot of local jurisdictions in the state, but it's also, as you said, going to be an issue during the 2016 session. Two things happened last week. One of which is a House committee took up a bill that would prevent local governments from regulating these ride services. And essentially it would, what they call in Tallahassee world, is preempt regulations to the state. So there would be uniform state regulations, and those regulations would be pretty light. That's the whole goal of it, to have relatively limited regulation of these companies and allow them to do business. Local governments and taxi companies don't like that. Taxi companies are heavily regulated on a local level. They pay money to local governments, and on the other hand, they, in the past, have usually had the markets pretty much to themselves. And now these new companies like Uber and Lyft are coming in there not facing the same regulations, and so it's created quite a bit of conflict.
Is the argument usually that it's not fair for one entity in a similar business to be regulated and another not regulated, or is it more than that?
Well, that's part of the argument. I mean, that's what the taxi companies are saying. You know, we, being the taxi companies, live under one set of regulations, and then these new guys are coming in and they don't face those same regulations. It's a whole different business model. They are transporting the same people, but it's a different business model. It's a different way of doing business. But you know, so and then the Uber and Lyft folks come in and say, "Hey, we're high tech, we're new, we don't want regulations. Free market, let the free market live." And so there's that sort of conflicting arguments. There's also conflict within the legislature about it. As I said, a House committee last week approved a bill that would preempt to the state regulation of them. And again, there wouldn't be much regulation. The Senate has not been very open, at least at this point, to that approach. We had an interview last week with Senate President Andy Gardner, and his idea is that there should be insurance requirements for Uber and Lyft and these other transportation services, but that the state really shouldn't do a whole lot more than that. The House bill does have some insurance requirements, but it also has this other sort of the big issue in it is preempting local control. But there's a lot of lobbying going on this issue. I mean, as I said, you got local governments, you got taxi companies, you got the Uber itself, and insurance companies. Yes. The auto insurance companies started working on this issue last session. They see a market there too, that they're going to, if they get an insurance requirement on all these drivers and these services, that's potential new market for them. So there's a lot of things in motion in the legislature. Also, something that happened last week, which was pretty interesting, was Governor Rick Scott's administration, the Department of Economic Opportunity, issued an order saying that Uber drivers are independent contractors and not employees of Uber. What that means from a practical standpoint is that someone loses their job as an Uber driver or doesn't work anymore for Uber, they can't apply for unemployment. But it's also part of the bigger picture about how these businesses work, and it goes into the whole broader debate about regulation on these businesses. And there is an appeal. It's already been filed on the Department of Economic Opportunity's ruling, but I think it pretty clearly shows that the Scott administration is coming down on the side of Uber and Lyft and these other companies.